And in order to get from floor to floor, you have to walk through the wall. And in the wall is every piece of storage there is in the house. So the wall isn't just a symbol, it's actually a functional, usable piece. Placing something out of context throws the conventional mind into confusion. In other words, it makes a connection. Similar to a technique of Magritte, the juxtaposition of unrelated images. We juxtapose multiple unexpected episodes to produce memorable experiences. And architecture of events. And I wasn't going to include this because it's so close, but they're having a liquidation sale now, and I'm afraid the life of this pencil, which might be very short. Samuel Beckett said, "Habit is a great deadener." Architecture can challenge habit, or as the surrealists put it, can make things strange. We're born into a strange world, and we develop strategies to make our world more familiar and therefore safer. But the price we pay for this sense of certainty is complacency. The freshness of our childhood is lost. Experience somehow becomes less intense and less exciting. We stop really seeing. Robert Irwin expressed it really well in his book. Seeing is forgetting the name of the thing one sees. In the same way, architecture can refresh our perceptions. This is one of the window boxes at the library, and the window boxes, all of them, focus in on some particular detail of the church, which most people under other circumstances would just see in a blur. But by focusing on them, it gives them a presence that they don't have otherwise. We can also open them up to new experiences, and sometimes make sense of the strange, the alien, and the unfamiliar. This is our building in Secaucus. And which way is up? Architecture, like life, is often best when it surprises us. Sometimes things should not be quite what they seem, just like this picture. Architecture should possess a spatial vitality related to the human body, like these bodies, human bodies in this picture. Its movement through space and the body's tactile, psychological involvement with the mind. The goal of our architecture is presence, a sensuousness. Its presence is experienced by the body with an appeal to the senses and to the imagination. A building with presence is not apologetic. It asserts itself as architecture, having a right to be, and it does not wish to disappear. Bishop George Berkeley said, "To be is to be seen." I have one final influence to talk about, and the one that's been almost an obsession with me for over 10 years. Because I'm interested in how things evolve. For me, this is a never-ending search, since it means an interest in redefinition and change. incompletion. But why incompletion? Frustration with the attitude of architecture. My perception that architecture has been too perfect, too complete, too separate, too self-reflexive, and generally still too self-referential. Asked when he had become a great musician, Miles Davis simply said, "When I knew what to leave out." The incomplete is a means of communication. Our work communicates through a multiplicity of materials, a multiplicity of forms, and a multiplicity of low-cost materials. This is form, excuse me. And a multiplicity of low-cost materials and details. This is housing for seniors, and all of these materials are in the couple dollar a square foot range. But all architecture is never really complete. On the contrary, it evolves and it changes and moves with time and with the multiple occupants who leave their individual marks on it. The incomplete has dotted the past 3,000 years of culture. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus said, "One cannot step twice into the same river." As they step into the same river, other and still other waters flow upon them. Nature hides itself. This is a project of ours, also. Not this one. This is proof that architecture is a search for the ideal. This is what we all know what this is. I'm not going to bother saying it. But architecture's long dream of the paradise of the ideal fortunately only beckons and still remains as elusive as a mirage. Thank God. And speaking of God, in Hebrew, perfect and complete are the same word. In Judaism, only God is complete. Thus the word God is spelled like this, to illustrate that even our perception of God is incomplete. Also in Judaism, during the holiday Sukkot, people are required to spend time in something called a sukkah, which has an incomplete roof, so that the sun comes in and the rain comes in, and it reminds them that they're all reliant on God. The incomplete includes the infinite, the impermanent. These are Guatemalan sand carpets. This is the Y on wheels. The fragmentary, the unfinished, the imperfect, and interruption. A blink is an interruption that enables us to see. Interruption allows us to distance ourselves from what sight that blinds us, to reclaim our consciousness. This is a work by an artist named Robert Mangold, where the volutes go one way, there's an interruption, and then the volutes go the other way, and you're supposed to contemplate what happens in the interruption. This is a student union, our student union. We photoshopped one of the columns out so that as you walk through this place, you'll say, what the hell happened to that column? Why isn't it with the rest of them? So the interruption gets into your mind. According to Alfred North Whitehead, everything is connected to everything else. Therefore, isn't everything incomplete? Coherence amongst its parts has been a revered value in architecture. So isn't architecture incomplete? The incomplete gains validity in proportion to the number of different perspectives from which it can be viewed. This is what I promised you earlier. This is my very first project. And this is a view of it from across the valley. And from here, it almost looks like one tight complex. But when you get inside it, it's really a series of buildings. If you notice, I didn't leave those slides on too long. Ambiguity is not accessory to the content, it is its fundamental feature. The architecture we still produce makes evidences our philosophical interest in ambiguity. Now this is the most ambiguous thing I know, which is Duchamp's door. When it's opened, it's closed. When it's closed, it's open. In preparing these thoughts for tonight, I reminded myself how important it has been for me personally to engage in critical examination of the things that I studied in school, that I've read, my observations and experiences. All have had a major impact on me. It's very important, I believe, to respond personally, to have a personal view and a personal ethic of architecture, and to be willing to take an occasional blow from a bitchy old lady. In this personal history I've outlined, I've been talking about the important influences that shape my work, and interestingly, none of them is architectural. So this talk acknowledges a comment made 20 years ago by Jean Nouvel. The future of architecture is not architectural. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to take any questions. Since I can't see necessarily, shout.
I have a question, Aaron.
Yeah.
You spoke very briefly about the self-referential qualities of architecture that we know to date. And I was wondering if you could speak to how retrospective our field has been to date, and where do you see that going?
Well, my personal opinion is that architecture looks back much more than it should look forward. The fact is that people that we're doing buildings for are not living in them yesterday. They're living in them today, and they're living in them for 25, 30 years in the future. And the fact also is that they're mostly financed somehow, which means that they have mortgages on them for 25 or 30 or more years. So architecture should be looking forward. If, to use an analogy, if medicine constantly looked backwards, where would we be? That's an analogy I owe to one of my students, but it's a good one. Anybody else? Yes?
Yeah, you talk a lot in the studio, at least, and you talked about it for a little while here, about ambiguity and incompletion. And I just wonder, in those terms, what are the differences that you see between those two? Because you do use those two words a lot. And I was just wondering how they can be applied then, after their distinction is made clear, how they can be